What's up, everybody? This week we are discussing how to pair strength training alongside with BJJ training. This is a question you guys ask us often, so we're going to spend some time on here giving you guys the answers that you need to be successful in your training and how to maximize your overall performance. I'm joined alongside with Coach Jimmy and Coach Andy. Both of these guys are equipped with a wealth of knowledge on this specific subject. So, gentlemen, let's go ahead and dive right in tonight. So I'm somebody who maybe I've been strength training, maybe I've just been doing BJJ training, but now I'm looking to combine the two. Simply, where do I start?
So just so we're clear, we're talking to the audience of not high-level competitors in combat sports. We're talking to people that it's either just getting into it or a couple of years into it, and they're just trying to figure out they're balancing a lot of things in life, lifting, conditioning, BJJ, or whatever else they may be doing. So we're going to talk about generalities of like how to structure your week, because one of the biggest mistakes I see is somebody will start this new hobby of BJJ, which is great, but they forget that it's still a stressor on the body, and they don't take that in consideration with all other aspects of their training. So just like we wouldn't go from 3 days a week of conditioning to all of a sudden 7 days a week of conditioning, well, if you're adding 2 or 3 days of BJJ on top of your 3-day lift program, you're still adding a lot of volume in a short amount of time. So that's just to get ahead of it on that topic. And then just how do you structure it? There's in strength and conditioning, I hate to say it, but it always depends. It depends on the individual. It depends on their life situation. But if you're lifting, again, our audience, if they're training with us, or lifting Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you have the option of doing Jiu Jitsu and lifting on the same day. Some people like doing that. I prefer somebody doing conditioning and then BJJ the same day. And then, so let's say Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you lift, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, not to say somebody new into jiu-jitsu is going to start going from 0 to 3 days a week, but you can insert your BJJ training on those Tuesday, Thursday, or Saturday. Again, I've seen it work both ways though. I've seen guys start rolling on the days they lift, and as long, your body is an amazing organism, so it'll adapt to any stress you throw on it, but there's just a smart way to do things. So at minimum, just slowly increase you doing this. Don't go from, all right, I'm going from all this lifting and running to then now I'm just throwing all this jiu-jitsu on top of it. So it's still a stress on the body, and you just need to know how to manage those stressors. So yeah, I'll just start with that, and then we can get some dialogue going.
Yeah, absolutely. So, sorry, go ahead, Andy.
I was going to say, just piggybacking off of that, it's for our audience, like Jimmy pointed out, you also have to keep in mind what is your primary goal. Is it general fitness? Is it training for your job as a firefighter, police officer, military warfighter, whatever? And where does BJJ fit into that? For some people, like a firefighter, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu can be a nice hobby. For an elite warfighter, it's a part of their job training. And so depending on the level of importance that you place on it is going to determine how you balance out your strength work, your conditioning work, and jiu-jitsu work. And another thing, along with Jimmy pointing out that it's a stressor, and it certainly is if you've never really rolled a lot, but you have played a contact sport, that's what it's like. If anybody who's ever played like a lot of hockey in one day, a lot of rugby one day, a lot of football in one day, and then you try to lift after that, your joints hurt. I mean, BJJ beats you up no matter what level you are in. So you also have to take that into account, is that you're going to have aches and pains that you're constantly dealing with if you roll regularly. So
no, that's a great point. And talking about goals, like a lot of people out there like to lift, they don't like to run. So if you're using BJJ as a conditioning tool, you can absolutely do that. Again, I'm always going to argue for more zone 2 training when, if you look at rolling, especially if you're new to rolling, your technique is not great. So you're probably redlining on live goes right away. You're hitting zone 4, zone 5, because you don't know what the hell you're doing, and you're just trying to fight to survive. So you're getting that high stress. Again, you are getting a conditioning component, but just to Andy's point, make sure you prioritize, understand what your goals are. If you're trying to be a power lifter and compete in powerlifting or compete in anything besides BJJ, just be smart about how you throw it into your program. If you just don't like to run and you want to do some conditioning and do BJJ, learn some self-defense and stuff like that, I think it's a great addition to a program. But just understand it's still a stressor to the body, but understand what your end state is. So,
Yeah.
Ben, you had
And
something.
I was going to say, I have trained and currently training people who BJJ is the priority and they want the strength and conditioning to support that. And the opposite of people who just want the strength conditioning is the focus and they can't, they want to add BJJ or it's something that they like to do that they just don't want to give up. And for those two groups are very different. The former group is like, okay, given that Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is the priority and that you're rolling, say, 4 to 5 days per week, how do we give you a minimal effective dose of strength training conditioning so that it doesn't affect you on the mat? Or at least allows you to be slightly like in a fatigue state over time so we can peak you later. The other type though is, I tell people I just had a client this week who wants to do his first powerlifting meet, but he loves the roll. And I said, hey, we can replace BJJ as your cardio days for a couple cardio days, but zone 2 is still going to be king. And instead of rolling like you normally do, just do like every other round on the mat. So typically most BJJ sessions are you do a little warm up, you do some shrimping and some escapes, and then you have a technique session where the professor teaches like one or two, tricks to put in your hat, and then you roll, usually, 3 to 5 minute rounds or 1 minute round with minimal rest, and you do that for say 20 to 30 minutes. When you get to that point, don't roll the whole time, just go every other. Now you're getting what you want and you're not burning yourself out for your other priority.
Yeah. And that's a good point. And then a lot of people are probably asking, like, program design wise, everybody wants to talk sports specific training. That was obviously big coming from college athletics, but we are general physical preparedness coaches. So if you look at any exercise out there, it's sports specific. A squat is sports specific. A lunge is sports specific. A jump is. So if you have a well balanced total body plan, it will carry over whether you're playing pickup basketball or you're playing lacrosse or you're doing BJJ. Then you could get further in the weeds of, okay, energy systems that, again, most people listening to this probably don't need to go that far in the rabbit hole, but just conditioning demands for certain sports. The conditioning demands to walk a round of 18 holes golf is a lot different than rolling on the mat. So conditioning is really where you can get more sports specific. And then also just think of what are things that would help you be successful in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So grip strength is really important in BJJ. Neck strength is really important in BJJ. Mobility is important because you're going to be put in positions that you're not normally in, whether you're strength training or just everyday life. So prioritizing all those things. But when you really look at it, that carries over to everything. If you're police, fire, military, you probably need good mobility in your ankles, all those things. So you just need a well-balanced plan. I will say, if you want to get further in the weeds, I think adductor strength, so your groin should get some work, especially if you're in guard and things like that. You're holding another human being with your adductors, and if you don't normally do that, you're going to be lit up. And yeah, so just, I don't think the plan has to be, I have to make my plan BJJ specific. I just think a well-balanced total body plan would fit the needs of everything. If you're competing, and I know we're not necessarily talking to this audience, you can get into different modalities and more complex training and things like that. But overall, just be smart with how you do it. So,
yeah. Yeah, I like that point there, Jimmy, because everyone always talks sports specific and really have no idea they really have no idea what they're trying to say with it. I remember a couple months ago on our Sunday Q&A on Instagram, somebody commented like, just watched this video on Amon-Ra St. Brown. Can't believe how many of the same things he was doing in his workout that we do on Warfighter. And it's true. Like all the things that athletes are going to do, sprint, jump, change direction, like you're going to get that in a full body training program, where the biggest difference we see between sports and different sports tactical setting is truly that conditioning these athletes need to do. That is the biggest difference. But if you have a well-rounded strength program, like everything else takes care of itself. But you have so many people that are just doing asinine things. You see them talk about doing like sports specific. And I love when you see like somebody at just like a commercial gym when they're trying to do something sports specific for their below average golf game, and you see them on like the cables, like trying to mimic a golf swing. You're just like, oh my God. Like, how much better off would you be just doing a like single arm dumbbell row? Yeah, that's the biggest difference.
Yeah, sorry to cut. I was going to say it's easier for us to say that, obviously, just because we know what good balanced training is. Just the average person out there, you don't know what you don't know. So, hey, I know my golf swing, what it's supposed to look like. Well, if I make it weighted, that's probably better. I'll hit the ball further. So I understand from that point of view.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think the bigger message for everybody is just training in multiple planes too. So in BJJ or in golf or anything, you're not just in this fixed path. That's why we believe in compound movements and training, again, with a barbell, with dumbbells, things like that. So you have to stabilize that external load. Because if you're constantly on fixed machines, whether it's a leg press or leg extension, and then you go and roll, you're used to that machine stabilizing the whole musculature in the joint. Well, now you have to stabilize it on your own on the mat. You're going to be more susceptible to injury because your body is not used to those planes of motion. So just thinking outside the box, doing more rotational work, 90-degree box jumps, rotational med ball throws, just getting out of that single plane, I think is important for a lot of people. Just general good training. So that would be what I'd call sports specific, but it's really just movement specific. So
yeah. And another myth that I want to bust is for the person who's been rolling or been doing combative sports their whole life and doesn't really strength train, or the person who has done a lot of strength training and then starts to roll and gets their ass kicked by somebody who's half their size. There's a tendency to think that strength training, it's not all that important. What's really important is my technique, right? And I hear that a lot in BJJ, and I get that specifically because the entire martial art made a name for itself because people who were smaller were beating people who were bigger and stronger than they are. Cool. But all things being equal, if skill level is the same, the stronger athlete is always going to win. So, for instance, a very high skilled sport is baseball. You cannot get away without developing skill in baseball, whether it's throwing, whether it's hitting, especially hitting. And there is a reason why steroids took off in baseball in the late 80s and 90s. It's because they realized that, yes, a steroid is not going to help me hit the sweet spot of a baseball, but if I'm off that sweet spot and I'm really jacked and strong, the ball's going to go over the fence. And the same thing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is, no doubt, technique is king, but all things being equal, if you're faced up against a guy who is just as fit as you are, the exact same size and the exact same belt and the exact same skill level, if he's stronger than you are, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
So,
as Louis Simmons would say, a little bit different for the analogy, but weak things break. So I've never met somebody that wished I never met somebody that wished they were weaker. Like, strength is always going to win, to Andy's point, and weak things break. So the stronger you are, the more resilient to injury you're going to be. That being said, in my opinion, I don't think you should train like a bodybuilder and just have all this unnecessary muscle mass and not any functionality to that movement. So again, just hammering home the fact that just having just good movement patterns in your training plan. So,
well, and to that point, you brought up a second ago about people don't know what they don't know. And from people not in our field, it's very easy to see a big individual and think, oh, they must be super strong. And they probably are strong. But there's a difference between having that bodybuilder physique and truly being strong in what you need to be strong in. Like, I'm sure we've all seen plenty of athletes that we coached in the college setting that were maybe 165 pounds, but were able to throw up a bunch of weight on a squat, but they wouldn't look nearly as strong as, some of these pro bodybuilders we see.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Again, you look at some of these guys in the UFC, like they don't look physically imposing, but like Nate Diaz, for example, I think he's a vegetarian or a vegan or something like that. I honestly don't even, I hate to say it. Sorry, Eric, or a dietitian, but I don't know the difference between vegan and vegetarian. It's probably a good thing, but
isn't one isn't one you only eat like beans or something? It's something like that.
I don't know.
I don't know. I know like Justin, what's his name? Justin Fields.
Yeah.
He does it.
Beefy, eating leafy. But like you look at Nate Diaz when he was fighting, he didn't look physically imposing, but he would absolutely knock you out. But everything I heard about his training, he had a gas tank because he would put in a ton of mileage, and yeah, he had a gas tank that could go forever. So, yeah, it's just be smart. That's all. So, but yeah, what are some other big questions that you get, Ben, as far as the BJJ? It's like structuring we talked about.
Well, I think you just talked about him having a big gas tank and able to just go. And we talked about the differences mainly that we'll see in tactical setting, athletics. A lot of it is the conditioning for the sport. So when we look at conditioning for BJJ, how are you programming that for just kind of the athlete that we have outlined on this episode?
Yeah. So with BJJ, you need all aspects of your energy system. You need to, just for the sake of just layman's terms, like you need short bouts so you can take a shot and take somebody down. You need longer scrambles that maybe 30 seconds to a minute. And then you need to be able to last however many, what is it, 3-minute rounds? I forget. It depends on like your federation too, if you do compete and things like that. But Andy, anytime you've rolled, it was anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes in practice and stuff.
Right.
So you need well-balanced conditioning, and you need to touch all aspects of energy systems. So Andy, do you want to talk about energy systems and go down that rabbit hole a little bit?
Yeah, we can a little bit. So three main energy systems using 3 different types of fuel sources: your aerobic, your anaerobic, and your phosphocreatine system. Your aerobic, that's going to be like burning firewood. That's long sustained efforts like jogging or walking uphill. Your anaerobic, that's going to be like about 30 seconds to 2-minute efforts. That's what you feel when you're doing a WOD at your local CrossFit gym or when you're rolling on the mat. It's the feeling of battery acid pumping through your veins and it's miserable. That's anaerobic. That uses like gasoline. And then phosphocreatine is for explosive movements like a vertical jump, and that's like gunpowder. So when you are rolling on the mat, your body is going to require a lot of glycogen, which means you're going to have to eat a lot of carbs. But the thing is that if you spend a lot of time in the anaerobic system and you don't have an aerobic base, you're going to be limited. So you have to have the zone 2 work. Now, I know black belts and professors who will disagree with me on this. They'll say like, hey, I could run a 30-minute 5 mile and then I got on the mat and was cooked. Or I was in the best rolling shape of my life, and then when I went to run my fitness test, I didn't do so well. And they were basically highlighting that there's a lack of transfer. I get that. Like when Michael Jordan went from basketball to baseball and then back again, there was some transformation that had to take place, and a lot of stuff didn't transfer. Nonetheless, biology is biology, and if all you're doing is anaerobic work by rolling on the mat, you are either going to burn out really fast or you're not going to have as much endurance as you otherwise could have, because even in those moments in a match where you are pumping the brakes and biding your time, you need that aerobic base to help you recover between efforts. So that's my short rant on that. Jimmy?
Yeah, no, agreed. When I worked with wrestling, Division I wrestling program, I would always hear again, I train them all summer, then they compete in the fall all the way. They have by far, in my opinion, I think the hardest sport to compete at in the collegiate athletics is wrestling, just because the season is so long, weight cuts, without getting further into it. But I would always hear the guys say, "I'm not in match shape yet." They'd have great mile times, 2 mile, 5 mile sprint times, all those things. But then the first couple weeks, they needed to get their legs under them on the mat, and we'd hear that same argument. I'm not in match shape, and I think part of it is technique. I think just honing your technique, so now you're more efficient on the mat. I'm sure it's the same with BJJ. Again, we talked about those new guys, new to rolling. You're redlining because you're fighting to survive. You don't know what move to put on the guy. And then you kind of settle in. You look at a black belt, watch them roll. It looks completely different than the new guy who's new to rolling and doesn't have any tools in the toolbox to try to tap somebody out. Typically what I've seen with black belts is they're kind of strategic with their moves. They're very calm, and then they just attack like a shark. So I think it's the same for all combat sports. You just need time and on the mat or whatever your sport is, just to get that, again, what do you want to call it, sport specific conditioning, because nothing is more sport specific than actually doing your sport. So you can do all the running and stuff you want, and to Andy's point, biology is biology, but there's nothing more sport specific than actually doing that thing. So
Yeah.
that's my
Well, yeah, and I think we all saw that back going to college is football. You know, you do all the conditioning in the summer, guys are looking great, they've done all the work. You're going to have somebody cramp regardless when you get into fall camp. Like, you're going to have people wanting to take a knee. And as a strength coach, it's easy to be like, oh shit, did we mess up? Did we not do the right things this summer? Like, you're always going to have that little bit of a period where they're truly adjusting to that sport specific.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. And the goal with conditioning for training sports is to hopefully hit a volume of conditioning that's more challenging than you're actually going to get in your sport. Because if you're not hitting a lot of volume in the off season or before you start that BJJ and you're not doing any conditioning, to Andy's point, you're going to be very sore. Hopefully you don't get injured, but if you go from not doing any conditioning and then jumping into BJJ, you're going to be more susceptible to injury, and it's going to be tougher to recover from those sessions if you don't have that aerobic base and some conditioning background. So that's how I tackled it in college. Regardless of the team I was training, I always tried to look at the sport and then try to build them to more volume than they had actually hit in a game or a match. And then hopefully they were ready for the competition or preseason or whatever we're getting to. So that's the goal of like the prep phase for it. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yep. So that's, what else, Ben? What other questions you get from our audience as far as BJJ goes?
No, I think we mainly hit it. I think the biggest one we commonly see is how to just structure their week throughout. And you touched on that at the beginning. And I think I believe you might have said at the beginning, but there's not going to be one way that's just, hey, this is how you have to do it. Like, get out there and try things, see what your body responds to. Just because these days work for me, like, your body may respond, somebody else's body may respond completely different. So getting out and trying it to see what you truly respond best to. But yeah, that how do I place my week or structure my week is the biggest question that we see coming off those Q&As.
Yeah, just because there's so many variables that go into it, like time of day. When are you going to do your jiu-jitsu? Is it in the morning? So can you do a run beforehand and then go right into jiu-jitsu? So you almost use the run as like a warm-up for jiu-jitsu. Or are you lifting in the morning and then 8-10 hours later you're rolling at night? That's going to be completely different. So there's so many variables, but find out what works best for you. But again, just the number one message, because I see the mistake all the time, is not thinking that jiu-jitsu is another workout. They just think it's part of their hobby, but it's still physically demanding. So don't expect, you may even, if you're on a percentage-based training plan, you should probably dial back your one or your training max and maybe take 85 to 90% of that number, so you're guaranteed to hit your actual numbers in training. So that would be a piece of advice. And that goes for anything. Any new stimulus to a program, you should probably dial back your training max, because you always want to, if you're new to rolling and you have to hit 90% for a set of 2 or something like that on a squat, bench, or deadlift, well, that 90% may feel like 110% because you're that new stimulus. So taking a step back, letting your body adapt, and then slowly moving the dirt, adding that training max 5-10 pounds over the next couple months. So that's how I would tackle it.
Yeah. And I just want to develop that idea of what kind of rolling you're doing. Jimmy, you just mentioned like the guy you watch a black belt roll versus like a white belt, and it's 2 different ways of skinning the cat. The black belt never gets tired. They know exactly what they're doing. They're calm, they're patient, whatever. And the white belt is flailing all over the place. But on top of that, there's also some people whose style is to, like myself, I just use my weight and lay on top of people like a fat kid, right? My style is really easy. I don't have to worry about it affecting my lifts as much because all I do is just fucking lay on people. If that's your style, then you're going to be able to afford a little bit more strength training. And I also know people who are black belts and they just straight up, they won't roll with anybody other than a black belt. It's too, they don't want to get themselves hurt. It's not worth their time. They understand that they'll give back to the lower belts as best they can, but all they do is they just roll in very specific, scenarios. And hey, they can afford to put a lot more into their strength training because they're not emptying their tank on the mat. So yeah, I just wanted to develop that a little bit more.
Yeah. Agreed.
Cool. Well, Jimmy, is there any closing comments you want to leave the guys with moving forward as they may start to incorporate these 2 together? Or we get it summed up?
Yeah, just sum it up. Again, think about your structure. Find out what works best for you. Be realistic. If you have to dial your training max back. Remember that it's still a stimulus. And get outside the single plane of motion exercises. Do multiple movement patterns. Add in some plyometrics, some power, some strength. A single leg strength is going to be really important. And again, well-balanced, good programming is going to carry over to any sport you're looking at. So that's my takeaway.
Cool. Absolutely. And you got something?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't know if I got a turn here or not.
No, you always have a turn at the end.
I was just going to say, keep in mind is always remember what your goals are. Review them, rehearse them, because your goals are going to set the context for everything. So just is it your job that you're training for? Is it, working out and being fit for its own sake? Is it Brazilian Jiu Jitsu that's starting to becoming number 1 priority? Just know where your priority is, and then you'll know how everything else fits into that.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely good stuff. So if you are interested in taking the next step in your BJJ training and you want to incorporate this strength work into it, but you're still not necessarily quite sure how to actually plan the minute details of your training session, we got you covered. If you go into the description, we have Coach Jimmy's 12-week full-body BJJ training program that will be 3 full lifts and 3 conditioning days. And you guys can follow that along with the tips that we have given you in this episode. Make sure to let us know in the comments what splits have worked for you. If you're hearing this episode and you go out and try some of these things, come back and let us know what worked for you. We're very interested in hearing how you guys respond to the information that was provided on this episode. But that's our episode for this week. We will see you guys back next week. Thanks.